Where are you now when darkness seems to win? Where are you now when the world is crumbling? Where are you now? Where are you now when all I feel is doubt? Or where are you now when I can't figure it out? These lyrics from Lauren Daigle's 2019 Grammy and award-winning album and song titled Look Up Child captures well the fear, the doubts, the uncertainty, and the darkness we felt back in March when this whole pandemic started and everything was shut down. It captures the fears we have now of the same thing happening again, as it's already happening in England and other parts of Europe. We know that since this pandemic has begun, alcoholism, addiction, suicide, domestic violence have increased. We've grown exhausted by the consequences of this pandemic, the limitations that it has imposed upon us, not to mention the tensions of this political climate, the uncertainties of what will happen next week and who will be president and how will we know and how long will it take to be known, and the different proposals on our own local amendments to our Constitution and laws, with the fires raging in Colorado, with so many uncertainties and fears and problems. It captures well what happens in the book of Revelations chapter 6, one chapter before today's reading, when the seven seals are opened up, and it symbolizes this cosmic disintegration, this complete collapse of heaven and earth, this utter devastation. It's kind of like how we feel right now, with tensions between loved ones and family and friends over political or religious issues. We're exhausted, we're burnt out, we're tired of all the polemic about issues of the pandemic or politics or anything else. We're exhausted. But imagine, in the face of everything that's happening right now, we could live in such a way that we're always looking up to the face of the Father, looking up in this confident, profound sense that we are children of God, His beloved. Imagine if we could live in such a way that we're above the fray, not indifferent to what's happening politically or what's happening sociologically, not immune to its effects by any means, but living in the world, but always looking up to heaven, living in this confidence and certainty that I am a beloved child of God, and that my purpose and my mission goes above and beyond anything that happens around me. This is the disposition of the saints. Lord, this is the people who long to see your face. They did so while on earth. The saints lived during times of communism and socialism and persecution and benevolent and malevolent kings and queens. They lived under democracies and anarchy, but they lived always in the sense of being God's child and living out their purpose and mission where He had them then and there, regardless of what was happening around them. They were not immune. They were always impacted profoundly by what happened around them, but it would not allow them to be held back from their purpose and to live in that profound sense that I am God's child. That is what the first letter of John chapter 3 tells us today. Beloved, see what love the Father has bestowed on us, that we may be called children of God. Yet so we are. John is all about living in the confidence of who and what we are, like the saints did. After the seven seals are opened in chapter 6 of the book of Revelations, chapter 7, which we enter into today, there's this interlude. There's a positive and reassuring tone. There's a stopgap from all the destruction and devastation, so that the servants of God can be marked with a seal on their foreheads, which will prevent their destruction. This reference in Revelations chapter 7 goes back to Ezekiel chapter 9, where it talks about this protective mark that's placed on God's children. Literally, it's the last letter of the alphabet, that is the Tav. This ancient form of the Tav was actually in the shape of a cross, or the letter T. The beloved in Ezekiel chapter 9 and later Revelations are marked on their foreheads with this cross. Just as every single one of us were marked on our foreheads with a cross on the day of our baptism by our godparents and our parents and the priest or deacon or bishop who baptized us. Just like the cross that is marked on our foreheads with the oil of sacred chrism on the day of our confirmation, we have been marked in the respite of destruction as God's beloved children. But we read that there's 144,000 saved. We think maybe that's not one of us. but it's a symbolic number, 12 times 12 times 1,000. Revelation 7 goes on to tell us that it also included a multitude that no one can count. The battle is won by those marked with the tav, with the cross, by enduring the agony of the most painful times, enduring faithful till death. The victors are those who are caught up in this tribulation, helpless like Jesus on the cross, but victorious in our sacrificial offering and in the miracle of God's love revealed in the resurrection, always looking up as children of God. This is the people that longs to see your face, whom we honor today, the saints and angels in heaven, and whom we aspire to follow and to be with. Salvation is possible for us, even now. Just last month, Blessed Carlo Acutis was beatified, a 15-year-old who was born in 1991, a millennial. And as a Gen Xer, it's shocking that millennials could get to heaven, but it's been proven already. Blessed Carlo Acutis, which would have been one of your grandchildren, right, born in 91 in London of Italian parents, moved to Milan, grew up, and at his first communion fell in love with the Lord in the Eucharist, went to Mass daily, confession weekly. He was a bit of a savant when it came to computer programming and created a website which gave all the Eucharistic miracles around the world and documented the evidence and gave pictures and information. He fell in love with Jesus, with confession, with the Blessed Sacrament. After going to Mass daily, he would spend time adoring Jesus in the tabernacle. And his boomer parents were not very religious, not very practicing, but Carlo knew who he was. He wasn't just the son of his parents. He was the beloved of God. And this millennial who would die quickly of leukemia at age 15 in 2006 knew who he was, had no fear of death, and did not mourn, but longed to see the face of Christ. And just last month in Assisi, as were his wishes, he was beatified and buried, the great saint, or blessed that he is. It's possible for millennials to be saved. Your grandchildren, right? The ones us Gen Xers look down upon, they can be saints. He lived in virtue of his baptism, called to live as a blessed. Blessed are those, right? The teachings of the Beatitudes in today's gospel is not just for Jesus' inner core of disciples, but for all of humankind. We are called to be the anahuim in Hebrew, the meek, the poor in spirit, to be merciful as God is merciful, to be pure in heart where our actions correspond with our intentions. Becoming children of God comes about through this knowledge of God, which is gained by keeping his commandments. That's what Blessed Carlo Acutis longed to do. And when he fell short, he went to confession every week, aspiring to separate himself from those that do not know God by living the commandments. In the midst of the pandemic and the political polemic, we live as people who love our enemy, who love those who differ from us, and who live above the fray, the tension, the anger, the violence, the fears, the uncertainties, and live as God's sons and daughters looking up, as Laura Daigle will say, looking up as God's child. The effect and sign of our knowledge of God is revealed in showing this love for one another and in confessing Jesus as the Son of God. Jesus declares blessed not because of their difficult circumstances, as we're in now, but in view of their future situation, which will come about through faithfulness, through enduring through the trial and tribulation and suffering. When we adopt this way of being blessed, we experience what it is to live as God's sons and daughters. Laura Daigle ends her song with these lyrics, speaking to God. You're not threatened by the war, she says. You're not shaken by the storm. I know you're in control, even in our suffering, even when it can't be seen. I know you're in control. As we live and celebrate this Feast of All Saints, we are called to walk in the footsteps of those that have gone before us and achieve the crown of heaven, to live looking up to God, live in that confidence, certainty of being loved as his children, above the fray and the chaos, so that along with the angels and saints, here and now, we can proclaim with one voice, salvation comes from our God, who is seated on the throne, and from the Lamb. Blessing and glory, wisdom and thanksgiving, honor, power and might be to our God forever and ever. Amen.